Rodney Croome, thank you for your time. Why does Australia need marriage equality?
Australia needs marriage equality obviously because it benefits same-sex partners. We are afforded full equality in the law. Same-sex relationships are no longer stigmatised as second best and second rate. And because it benefits our families, and if we're raising children, it benefits those children by providing us with strengthened relationships, more committed relationships, greater participation in family life and greater stability for those children. But more than that, I think this issue is important for all Australians because it is emblematic of whether this nation will move forward towards greater equality, greater inclusion, or whether we will be stuck, as we currently are, it would seem, on this issue, in a situation where those who oppose equality, oppose inclusion, and for often theological reasons, are dictating civil law and excluding some people from society.
Where are we now with the gay marriage debate in Australia? It's Mardi Gras, March 2012.
This issue is now firmly at the centre of Australian political debate, and it certainly has a very high profile. Recently, of course, when Magda Szubanski came out, she became part of a much larger push that includes many celebrities and many ordinary Australians who support this issue. And we know from opinion polls that over 60% of Australians think this reform should happen, and 75% think it's inevitable. Even 53%, that's a majority of Australian Christians, support this reform. So clearly, this reform is a high-profile one, and it has the support of a majority of Australians. The challenge now is to translate that support into support in Parliament. Now, in December, the Australian Labor Party National Conference supported marriage equality, which was an important step forward, but it also supported a conscience vote for Labor MPs, and there will be some MPs who vote against it. So the challenge for us is to ensure there's support across Parliament and across parties so that we can translate that majority community support into majority parliamentary support.
What can Australia learn from overseas experiences of gay marriage, other countries that have introduced it?
There's two things that we can learn. Firstly, that when reform happens, the sky doesn't fall in. We've heard from experts such as Professor Lee Badgett, from campaigners such as Boris Dietrich, that when reform occurs overseas, the dire predictions of those who oppose equality just don't come true. Marriage doesn't disintegrate, the family isn't destroyed, children aren't disadvantaged, people won't start marrying their cars or their pets or their plasma screens. It just doesn't happen. But more importantly, I think what we learn from the overseas experience is that this reform has really important positive impacts, that same-sex couples feel more committed, that the children being raised by same-sex couples feel more secure and have greater stability in their lives, that there's greater participation in family and community life from same-sex couples and their children, and that the societies which adopt this reform feel themselves to be more equitable and fairer societies. If this reform can happen, as it has in Spain, in Portugal and Argentina, and in South Africa, in countries with such diverse cultural backgrounds and in some cases strong religious traditions, then it says a lot about Australia that it can't yet happen here. And I think it will say equally a lot about Australia when it does happen, that we are fulfilling our promise and our dream, if you like, of being a nation that recognises and affirms a fair go.
You've been doing lots of lobbying recently for the Australian Marriage Equality Organisation. How are things looking now with all the lobbying you've been doing?
There has been a lot of lobbying. There have been visits to Canberra by same-sex couples and their families and their children, by psychologists who support marriage equality and clergy who support marriage equality, and most recently by international experts in the area. And what I find is that there is a slow but definite increase in support for this issue in both major parties, and in particular in the Liberal and even national parties in the coalition. What we're seeing there is a greater debate in the ranks of the coalition on this issue, And that can only be a good thing. There are still coalition members who aren't willing to declare their support for this publicly, but I know that when a vote comes, it will be closer than many people realise or assume.
So you're expecting the Liberal Party will allow its backbenchers a free vote on this?
Tony Abbott has said that backbenchers have a conscience vote, that they can support this if they wish. But he said that frontbenchers can't support it with impunity, that if they do support it, they'll lose their front bench position.
So Malcolm Turnbull, for example.
Yes. So Malcolm Turnbull and other frontbenchers who support this. My hope is that by the time this issue comes to be debated in Parliament, Tony Abbott will have sent a stronger message that it's possible for coalition MPs and senators to vote for this, and freed his frontbenchers to do so. That would only be reasonable given that the Labor Party has a conscience vote, and that the Liberal Party, of course, prides itself on being the party of individual freedom and personal choice. It seems ironic that given those values, it doesn't allow its members the same freedom as Labor members currently have. I hope that those values, those liberal, small L liberal values that the Liberal Party says it stands for, will win out.
Finally, what would you say to your average Aussie who hasn't made their mind up yet on this subject?
If you value commitment in relationships, if you believe that love is more important than prejudice, if you believe that all Australian children should have the same opportunities regardless of who their parents are, then please consider supporting this reform.
Rodney Croome, thank you very much.
Thank you.